All right, we are live. If you're in the Hash Office Hours YouTube channel, let us know how the audio is. That would really help us out. So, welcome everybody to the afternoon edition, aka West Coast edition of the Kubernetes Office Hours. This is your monthly live stream where we have a wonderful panel of experts that you see all up here who will be answering your user questions from Hash Office Hours on the Kubernetes Slack and Kubernetes users. We'll talk about what's happening in the Kubernetes landscape and do all sorts of fun things. So with that, before we start, why don't we have everyone introduce themselves? Let's go Bob, Jeff, Mario, Solly, Stefan, in order.
Okay. Well, my name is Bob Killen. I am a research cloud administrator with the University of Michigan. Sort of my specialty is on-prem deployments, bare metal, networking, and all the crazy stuff that crops up in between.
My name is Jeffrey Sika. I also work for the University of Michigan, and these days I'm kind of all over the place. So I'm mainly a developer, though.
Hey guys, I am Mario Loria. I work with Bob, George, and Jeff to create community here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the surrounding areas. I work for LiquidWeb as a site reliability engineer, and I am mostly doing bare metal, networking, and storage, and other things around the Kubernetes realm of going to production.
Hi, my name is Solly Ross. I'm the SIG lead for SIG autoscaling and a general Kubernetes contributor. I work at Red Hat on Kubernetes and on OpenShift. And so I have also some miscellaneous collection of production information from there.
Hi, I'm Stefan Prodan. I work for Weaveworks. I'm part of the developer experience team here. I work mostly around integrations around Kubernetes with other cool stuff like Istio, and we also run our own open source projects around Kubernetes, and also I'm into that. Yeah, my background is a Golang developer mostly.
Awesome, and I'm George Castro, and I'll be your host today. I work at Heptio as a community manager, and I help organize and take notes and field questions and things like that. So before we begin, first of all, check the topic in Hash Office Hours. That'll give you the links to the live stream, when the dates are and the times are. We run this on the third Wednesday of every month. And before we begin, let's just talk about some quick house rules, ground rules to get everyone started. So if you're in the channel, this is a judgment-free zone. So everyone's had to start from somewhere. So if you see someone asking a question that you think is too simple, that's fine. Just help them out. And while we will do our best to answer all of your questions, we don't have SSH access to your cluster. So there might be situations where we can't really help you live debug something, but at a minimum, we can at least try to get you to where you need to go, or show you where you need to look to help you solve your problem. So for example, this morning we found an example that was underdocumented, and we were able to file that as an issue in Kubernetes. So this helps us get feedback from you as users on the things that we need to get better at. Panelists, you're encouraged to expand on your answers with your experience and your pro tips and things like that. So while you can't answer the question, if we're talking about a specific area, feel free to add any expertise that you feel would help there. Audience, you can help us out while we're answering questions. If you've seen this problem before or you know something about it, feel free to just whack in URLs for documentation or for maybe blog posts. So if you have any information that can help the person, feel free to just put it in the Slack channel so we can help each other out. And also we'll be looking for URLs in the channel that we can read out if that helps everybody. You can post your questions in the Slack channel, or if you've posted one already on Slack Overflow, just give us the URL in the Slack channel. If it's a generic question, we have a thread on discuss.kubernetes.io where we're collecting questions. You can also help us out by tweeting, spreading the word, paying it forward. You can subscribe to the channel here, and you'll get a ton of Kubernetes content that's just very useful in learning how to use this stuff. Like we said, all of these sessions are recorded. And if you're using this as a work resource and it's useful for you, give us some feedback on how we could do better so we can make the show useful for as many people as possible. If you do want to sit on this panel, these are all volunteers, so feel free to let us know if you have a specific area of expertise. We have a lot of generalists here, but if We've always finding that we need a storage person, for example, that sort of thing. So if you have expertise, or if you've done something really awesome with Kubernetes and you want to help pay it forward, feel free to contact me and we can have you sit on the panel. The commitment is 1 hour a month. But if you can only do it at certain times, we'll work with you to get you on here if that's fine. You can help us take notes if you want. We'll toss the HackMD URL there in the channel. And we're always looking for marketing help, especially getting the word out to users. There's like 40,000 people in Kubernetes users, and we're always looking on how we can help them. At the end here, we'll be holding a raffle for a Kubernetes t-shirt. So the way it works is if you ask your question and we address it on the air, Jeff will put you in a little raffle, and at the end we'll figure out who won, and then I'll give you a code and you get a free Kubernetes t-shirt, which none of us are wearing today. And lastly, feel free to hang out Hash office hours afterwards. The main channel could be very large and intimidating, very busy. So we like to keep track of the questions that happen in this channel. So if it's in between office hours and you run into an issue, whack it in the channel, and then we'll get to it as we get through our queue. What Bob and Jeff do before each session is they'll go through that month's worth of questions, and if we find something that is unanswered, we'll usually do our best to help. And then worst case, we'll send you to the right SIG or to the right place where you can get help. So with that, is everybody ready to begin? All right, great. So our first question comes from Oxygen. Thanks for joining. He says, if you have an API deployment that will be used by your internal application, but also externally through Ingress, is it recommended to use 2 services? One that will allow NSLookup DNS and one for the Ingress controller? Could not find a way for the Ingress service to give pod IPs, or is there a better way to go? Hard to formulate it. Hope that made sense.
So I'm not entirely sure what they're asking here. In general, you should be able to use the same service. You should be able to point to the same service from like Ingress and use it internally. Like I don't think there's any reason that you shouldn't be able to just reuse an existing service as the target of Ingress. Perhaps, can you clarify, unless anybody else has any feedback here, can you like clarify with like some like pseudo YAML or like pseudo Kubernetes API object to like kind of clarify like what you want to do and maybe like the part that's not working, you know, like the equivalent of pseudocode for Kubernetes API object.
The one thing I was also going to ask is if they tried getting to the service endpoint through the internal DNS name.
Yeah, like that shouldn't
matter if it's going through the Ingress controller, for at least for the outside stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So like if you're inside, DNS should work fine, presumably, assuming you're running kubedns. And if you're outside, the Ingress name should work fine as well.
It also depends a lot of what Ingress you choose, right? Even if you have this nice interface, it depends a lot. If you use Nginx, that will get directly to the pod, will not use the cluster IP service. If you use something like Istio, they have their own stuff like a virtual gateway, their own routing. So it depends a lot. To diagnose such a problem, it depends a lot of what Ingress controller you choose. But yeah, usually the cluster IP service should work inside and reuse that in your Ingress definition.
Mm-hmm. I see typing.
Yes, so Oxygen, we're going to go ahead and let you think on that for a minute and type, and then we'll come back. We'll answer these 2 questions here, and then we'll get back to you. That gives you time there to let us know what. So what do we need? What Ingress controller he's using? And Solly would like to see
some pseudocode or something like that.
Yeah, of what you're trying to do. So while that's happening, and those of you that are listening at any time, if there's a way, if you need something clarified or something like that, just type it in the channel. We'll always come back to you if need be. Eve C says, I have 2 real basic questions, if you don't mind answering. Is it possible to do a label selector of key equals value or other key equals value? I could see in the docs examples of doing key equals value or other value, but no mention of an or statement across multiple labels.
I think you can still do that with set-based selectors.
I mean, I think it's and. So you can say like the person said, you can say label in 1, 2, and label it and other label in 3, 4, but I don't think you can say.
Oh yeah, not across those labels. Like
yeah,
that.
I think like so in set-based label selectors, for people who are not familiar, so like the traditional label selectors that a lot of people are used to are just basic equality label selectors, and it's like label 1 equals value 1, label 2 equals value 2. So in set-based label selectors, we can have different kind of predicates for our labels that go beyond just equality. But I believe those are still like all the predicates are anded together, right? So you have to make those as 2 different requests.
Yep, and so right here in the docs, the sentence, in the case of multiple requirements, all must be satisfied, so the comma separator acts as a logical and operator.
So you can do some fun stuff with set-based label selectors, but you can't or things.
Okay, and let us know if that answered your question. Moving on to the second question. If I have 2 containers in a pod, is there a clean way of ordering shutdown? I.e., I want container 2 to ideally shut down after container 1. Is there a better way to do this on some pre-stop crypt to container 2 that waits until container 1 stops before responding to a ping or a curl or something like that?
So I think this is the perfect use case for init containers when you execute them one by one. So let's say your main container that runs in a pod needs some database backend to be up. You can create an init container and do a while there and check if that backend is up or not. If it's up, it will unblock and you can actually go to the stage where you run your actual container in a pod. So with init containers, you can have this sequential block system to orchestrate something like that.
Okay. And do we have a link that we can plop in for init containers?
Yeah, I'm not in. Perhaps if you can clarify a little bit what you're asking, because I'm not entirely sure init containers solve their use case here. The way I'm reading it is that like they have like container A and container B, right? And the pod gets a, and they're both long-running containers, and the pod gets a shutdown.
They're looking for ordered shutdown.
Yeah.
Right, which I don't think is
it's
something
the
to do with
inverse.
Kubernetes.
Yeah. It's kind of the opposite of init containers.
Yeah, the inverted init containers, right?
There was actually something. There was an issue raised on this recently, I think, called like defer containers, or something like that, to essentially have like a init for shutdown. But I don't believe that functionality is in there right now.
But in general, just kind of like as a design decision, you want to be careful about assuming you can have any kind of ordering, because there's no guarantee that one of your containers won't accidentally crash at any point in time. So like in the happy path, sure, you can try to assume some ordering, but your program should probably deal with the idea that one container might stop after another. That being said, if like the idea is you want an extra container around to make sure it, like, say, collects the last bit of logs from your program, I would probably have some sort of I don't know, socket or like a while loop, and it can receive the graceful shutdown instruction and then ignore it until it stops seeing the other thing alive, as you suggested.
Yeah, he or she goes on to say container 1 flushes data to container 2, with container 2 having persistence. So ideally 2 stays up until 1 goes away. But you're probably right, they should be separate pods.
But I mean, if it's actually a sidecar container, you could just you could receive the graceful shutdown signal. So Kubernetes sends a different signal for like the initial, hey, by the way, you should start getting shut down, and the actual like, nope, you're ending now. So there's a graceful shutdown period. And so it could receive that graceful shutdown signal, wait till do like some sort of health check on the other container, and wait until that health check ends, and make sure, so that it can make sure it's exported the last bit of the data or whatever.
So Helm Newbie, welcome, asks, what I think Oxygen is asking, talking about our first question here, is, and I have this question myself, is that sometimes you want direct external to your pods. An example would be NoSQL DB stateful set, where you have an external app that needs to connect to all the pods separately. I've never found a good way to do that. And then, okay.
You could probably use a service, one of the external services or something with a service type load balancer.
Yeah, you need to use service type load balancer, and then in your label selector for the service, target like each thing that you spin up will have the actual like stateful set name in it and with its ordinal in there, so you can target each one individually if you want.
The name is headless service.
Yeah.
In the documentation, so search for headless service. It will give you.
That's for the internal cluster IP part.
The other thing you can do is you could basically write your own ingress controller that would do that. It's not like, or ingress like thing, right? Like it's actually a fairly common pattern, and I'm surprised that I haven't seen a more general solution for it that just kind of deals with this particular use case, because I've had a number of people ask me about it. But like writing a very simple controller that, you know, configures Nginx or something to forward through individual names to endpoints wouldn't be too hard.
Okay, and Oxygen, let us know if that also answers your question, if you indeed had the same question as Helm Newbie, which maybe. Did you guys get the reply there where he's using the Google Ingress controller at 4:15? So, okay, just waiting for people to type to see if that answered the question for them. Okay, moving on. EVC says, thanks a lot. Pre-stop hook sounds like it's the way to go. Mario posted in the lifecycle docs. Was that the lifecycle docs that you posted with container hooks?
Yep, container lifecycle hooks, yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Actually pretty well documented, so.
Excellent.
George, did we miss a question from Helm Newbie with persistent volumes?
No. Yes, but I missed a question before that. So
okay,
we're going to do this one next. Sorry, if I miss your question at any time, please repeat it. Or if you whack question in big, bold, or capital letters so I can see it. So we'll do Surya's, I hope I got your name right, question, and then we'll come back to Helm Newbie here. Surya asks, can we use both security context deny and pod security policy in admission controllers, or do we need to only use either one of them?
I don't know 100%, but I think the API allows for both. I haven't done it though, so.
Anyone have any experience in this one? Jeff, could you dig and look? Just see if the API supports it or not. You don't have to set up a cluster and test it now, but you can theoretically find out if it works.
Quick hack / cluster up, go.
Yes. So
as we wait for it,
Helm Newbie comes back with, thanks for the answer, but I'm not sure how using a headless service addresses the need for reaching individual pods inside my Kubernetes cluster. But maybe you can post an example.
So hitting the individual pods inside your cluster from outside or inside, because you can't hit the individual ones inside because they will all be prefixed with the stateful set name. From outside, yeah, what you wind up having to do is you have to create a service for each instance of those, of service type load balancer, and then basically modify your selector for each one to target them individually. If you look at the labels on pod that's spun up via stateful set, you'll see that they have their full stateful set name as a label in there, so you can target them all individually.
That's as of Kubernetes. It's either 1.9 or 1.10. If you're going from before then, that label's not there.
Okay.
So it's a little bit harder. But yeah, that would be the way to do it without writing anything new.
Yeah. The other thing you can do too is if you do want to try like exposing it as like a node port service, you can set the external policy, the external traffic policy, so that way only the nodes that are running an instance of the pod will answer. But that'll only work under very specific use cases, and honestly, it's probably a bad suggestion now that I think about it. Sorry.
All right, let's see what Helm Newbie says. I try with no port, but that generates a lot of problems on the client side.
Yeah, so I still think you got to use like service type load balancer and target each one individually.
And it looks like the panel is nodding.
Yeah, that's probably the most basic solution for that.
Okay. All right. And while he's typing there, Oxygen says, yes, that answers it. I'll just connect to the service or build my own controller. That's
George.
Yes. It
To
looks like
answer, yes, you can have both security context deny and pod security policy set at the same time. Essentially,
okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Just can you repeat the question? Sorry. So I wanted to
repeat the question.
Yeah.
Can we use both a security context deny and a pod security policy in admission controllers, or do you need to use only either one of them, was the question. And you can use both, because the security context deny will deny pods that try to set certain security context fields, whereas pod security policy actually checks to see if on creation or modification of the pod, it is allowed to based on what security context it's requesting. So one is it modifying a security context? One is it requesting it or not?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not me spinning up a cluster and testing, but just based on what I'm reading, you can do both.
Sure. So let me see. Let me just, did that answer your question? Okay, so while we do that, let's summarize what's happening here in chat here for those of you that are on video. So Hum Newbie comes back with like, so for 3 pods, I need 3 different services. And Bob says, yes, want to target each pod individually, and they'll get their own IP externally. Can you walk us through this real quick, Bob?
Sorry, I was in the middle of typing and spinning up an instance really quick.
Oh, okay, all right. If you need time, we can find. Sorry.
No, I just need. I don't remember the label name off the top of my head.
I am looking that up right now. It's on the.
Is it on the stateful set docs?
It was, yeah. It's statefulset.kubernetes.io/pod-name.
There we go.
It's a little bit of a mouthful to say out loud, but I swear it makes sense when you read it.
Yep.
Let's see, audience. Let's see if we get each of the panelists spinning up a cluster.
It's under pod identity, the pod name label heading on the documentation. So you create a service that has a selector that selects that particular label, which is kind of cumbersome. You could have a script or a controller script that did it automatically.
Okay. And Surya says they get it, but they're still confused. If you have follow-up questions, feel free to stick whack them in the channel there. I think that's. I don't think I've missed any questions. So if you have,
you did.
Okay, where are we looking at?
Helm Newbie asked one earlier about persistent volumes. Did we answer that, or was that?
No, we didn't get that.
No, we have not.
Okay. Scroll up to 414, and I can answer that one.
Okay, I got you. Okay, Helm Newbie asks, I have a persistent volume host path, persistent volume claim, and a pod running a DB. When I go to the file system, I don't see any files there, and I suspect that data is still there even after I delete everything, probably because of a retain policy. Does anyone know how I can clean it up? Is there a way to look at which files are in my PVC?
The short answer is, if you're using something like host path, the only way you can clean it up is a manual step. There's no like auto cleaning files off of your host once the volume or the volume claim is gone. I am very confused why you wouldn't see the files on your host system if they are being passed through, though. That kind of makes sense.
What type of persistent volumes are you using? Can you maybe?
He says host path.
Oh, he does say host path.
Yeah, I'd agree with Jeff there. That's very weird. wonder if something's not set up correctly.
So if it is host path, the file should definitely be persisting regardless of the pod going away or the claim going away or the volume itself going away, actually. It's just creating or attaching a folder to the pod in a very, very simple term. So if that isn't happening, then there's a chance that the volume is actually not being created and adhered to, and it's just storing it within the container itself.
Yeah, he says, thanks, that's exactly what's happening. I ls-all the file system, I see nothing, but when I spin new pods, I see that they're getting stuff that should not be there.
Whew.
Interesting. Helm newbie, I'd recommend maybe you go into discuss and open up a new thread and kind of give us some YAML, see what your configuration is as well as what you're saying, because maybe there's a bug here or something. But
yeah, I'd also love to see the YAML for the volume and the claim.
All right, Helm newbie, if that's possible, you might have to, I don't know what people's policies are at work, pasting around YAML files. Oh, he can provide all that. Yeah, that's great. Feel free to toss it in a gist. That's like gist.github.com or toss it in.
Yeah, you could throw it in the discuss thread too, like mentioned before.
Yeah. Let me put the thread. We actually have an office hours thread for today. If you want to stick stuff in here, this is the related discussion for today's session. And this is what we'll be posting the notes from later as well. So feel free to whack them in there and we'll sort that out. I get the thumbs up for somebody. All right. Awesome. So it looks like he's, let's give him some time to do that. More questions. So did I miss any more? Let me look.
I don't think so.
Okay. So let's go ahead and give people a chance to ask questions. I see lots of furious typing. So if you have any other questions or you'd like some clarification on some of the answers that we're giving, please let us know. But first, what have we got going around this week? Any big things? I saw that code slush is happening. I don't know, in 1.11. I saw something scroll by about a slush. I'm sorry, code thaw for 1.11 that Josh Burke has posted. So contributors are now pushing pull requests against master. So I guess that means 1.11 is due really soonish. I want to say next week-ish.
The thing I'm super excited about 1.11 is the IPVS based for like in-cluster service load balancing instead of just using IP tables.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's gonna be amazing.
So for people who are like interested in like requesting features from SIGs, now is also probably a good time to start talking to the SIG you're interested in if there's something that you would like to see or some feedback you would like to give. Because, you know, 1.12 is about to open soon because of the code thaw. So this is probably a good time to, you know, some of the SIGs may have started their planning already or are doing planning.
Sure. So C. Burner's going to ask a question that we actually talked about this morning, but it doesn't hurt to repeat it again. C. Burner, thanks for coming. He says, I have a question about using initializers on pods. How do I deploy a pod initializer without deadlocking? And then a link there to their Stack Overflow question. We talked about this briefly this morning, and there is an answer posted. What do we?
Yep. Jeff should cover it. Be able to cover it again.
Yeah.
So if your initializer is only relying on one pod, no matter what, you're going to have a deadlock. The best way to handle it is you actually create an admission controller webhook, and then you have an HA service hosted within Kubernetes itself. So if a host or several hosts go down, so long as you know the pod is on a host that's up, it'll still resolve the initializer. Does that make sense to the panel? Because I figure if it makes sense to them, it should be all right if you're going deep into initializers.
We got several people typing now, so you might have some more questions.
People are furiously typing now.
All right.
Furiously.
While we're waiting for people to type, I think Helm Newbie also kind of asked a follow-up question there, which is, where does the file system get mounted to during container creation? Which is, actually a very interesting question. I believe what happens, it's been a while since I've looked at this particular code path, is that there's a special volumes directory for each pod and container. And I think things get like bind mounted into that special volumes directory. It's a little bit of a funky setup. But if you look for like, I think it's like etc Kubernetes volumes by default or something like that. You should be able to like see that directory and all the volumes under it. People can feel free to correct me though. It's been a while since I've looked at that.
No, you're absolutely right. And with using a provider, i.e. Portworx or i.e. some other third-party provider for storage, they will sometimes mount storage in a directory that they've decided on. So maybe var lib, Portworx, blah, right? So yeah, but you are definitely right. That's still the way things are done.
Okay, and how newbies posted their YAML there. I'm going to go ahead and link that up to the right thread, and I'll work on reformatting it after. So let's do that, and let me give some time for the panel here to digest the YAML. So let's catch people up here who might just be joining the stream. So we're in the middle of figuring out how newbies files show up when they should not, when a pod is destroyed and he recreates a new one. Is that correct? And while we're doing that, if you're just joining the stream, the way it works is we're answering live questions on #office-hours on the Kubernetes Slack. If you ask a question and we talk about it on the air, you're automatically entered into the t-shirt drawing, which we'll be having at the end of the show. We can get a swanky Kubernetes t-shirt. We have about a half hour left to go, so the more questions, the better. We're going to give the panel here some time to digest a load of YAML that we just got.
So one thing that I noticed just glancing through, I don't actually see the YAML for the claim. I see that there's whatchamacallit, a claim template.
Yeah, that's part of the stateful set.
Okay.
So we're getting a bunch of, oh boy.
Yeah.
Is there a way to collapse that post? 1 second.
Can you turn that into like a gesture code so we can sort of minimize it? Yeah. Snippet.
Snippet, please. All right. Does one of you want to handle going through the YAML file while the rest of us continue answering questions, and then we come back to you? Someone feel?
Could you also like post describe it or output the YAML of the actually created stateful set so we can see what it's actually doing?
Just stick that in the thread probably.
Yeah. So okay, while that's getting sorted, let's move on there to Ivesi's next question. We all set? Who's doing the YAML digging? Is that Bob and Jeff? Could everyone else? You guys want to handle that? Okay, so
here I'll reply to him in Slack.
Okay, excellent. All right, so Eve C, sorry if I mispronounced that, asks, any best practice recommendations for shipping logs off from containers to Elastic in this case? Currently using a FileBeat daemon set to pull container logs from the nodes, but it's hard to know what log formats are going to come through, i.e. multi-lines get mangled.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm usually using FluentD for this sort of operations, and FluentD is actually pretty smart about that. You'll not get, with using FluentD multi-line parser, you'll not get mixed logs out of there. It also has an in-memory MQ on each instance it also runs as a daemon set, but it has an in-memory MQ on its own, and it will not bombard your Elasticsearch if, let's say, one application goes haywire and logs like 100 megabytes of logs and stuff like that. Also, another feature that I used and I find it very useful is to use FluentD to extract some kind of metrics from your application logs and expose that to Prometheus if you don't want to actually instrument your application. But yeah, FluentD is like in my mind, the best way.
And that's Fluent Bit or Fluent D, just to make sure.
So there are two things. Fluent D is you get the whole package. It has lots of filters out there. Fluent Bit is written in C and has I don't know, is less of a burden on each node.
Okay.
It uses less resources in terms of CPU, memory, whatever. But it has a multi-line filter, but it doesn't have all those filters that FluentD comes with.
Okay. And Devin Barrett likes to add that he's using FluentBit very happily. And the follow-up question, does FluentD, FluentBit auto-detect the multi-line log messages, or do you have to configure it to understand a Java stack trace, for example, as a single message?
For the Java logs, there is a pre-built filter that comes with FluentD. You don't have to install it separately. So yeah, it detects that.
Okay, awesome. Anybody else? Any other comments? All right, are we coming back to Hamnubi's question, or should I move on?
We're waiting for more info.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so moving on here. Question 1 from Oxygen asks, is there a way to see what header/ports the Google Ingress controller is getting when people connect?
Not that I know, but I would, from the client side, try to interpret what headers are being sent from your application or whatever you're using to see what's going on there. I don't know the Google controller if there is a way to actually see those.
Okay. And then they have a follow-up question. If we want to talk to a third-party API server and we have several microservices talking to it, how do we find out what IP to give them so they can whitelist it? Google's default gateway's external IP, I guess, and is it static so I don't need them to update it later?
Yeah, we need more information about the API server. By third party, does he mean it's external? Because that would be probably an external service or external name to get to that would be best. I'm not really exactly sure what he's trying to do there. So if you give an example, that would be great.
Yep, and just
I think he just needs the IPs of what it's exiting out as, what it's netting out as, essentially.
Oh, if you're doing like IP-based filtering.
Yeah, IP filtering.
So
I honestly don't know for GKE.
So yeah. on GKE, you can reserve a global IP, and you can use, then that IP will not change. I did that from Terraform a couple of times. So if you
for the netting out part?
For the L7 load balancer. But not, it's ingress, not egress.
Yeah, I think
right. That's
looking
for
for
egress.
There are egress solutions. I'm not sure how they work on Google though.
Okay, let's wait for more information there.
I will say there are Google folks who work on this stuff that hang around various channels. So if you can track them down, you can actually probably ask some of the people who work on this stuff directly.
Mm-hmm. So let us know how that works out for you, though, because I do like to follow up. We can at least point you in the right direction. Suresh asks, just a related question: how does initializer differ from an admission controller? As I understand, with initializer we inject a init pod, and with admission controller Istio inject Envoy proxy inside the pod. Both of these things injecting a container inside the pod. So I'm confused by this.
So I can give the general answer. The admission controller is just something that checks to see, hey, can this thing be scheduled based on these rules? Mm-hmm. Usually you build an initializer if you want to then say, hey, modify or update something on the fly once this thing gets scheduled. Or perform another action on the cluster if this thing gets scheduled.
Okay.
Or updated.
Any other comment? Looks like Y'all are generally not nodding, but you're not.
The big difference is that admission controllers are completely synchronous. Like, so they're basically saying on a particular API server event, apply this filter, and the filter, I believe, can potentially like mutate stuff. But like apply this filter, and once the filter completes, pass it on to the rest of the filters, and then eventually through like the actual backend of the API server to like do the storage and whatnot. Whereas initializer puts like a marker on that says, by the way, something is going to want to do something to this later, and then that thing can go and do a bunch of asynchronous work. It could make calls and stuff like that without necessarily blocking up the API server from doing other work.
Right. The one thing is it will block the thing from being scheduled still until all of the initializer chain completes.
Yeah, it'll anything that's not specifically looking for like pre-initialized objects will not see those objects, right? So if you put the initializer on a pod or whatever, it won't get scheduled and stuff. But it allows you to do much more asynchronous work without necessarily having a performance impact on the API server.
Yep.
Okay, Suresh, I hope that answers your question. Thanks for coming. Before we move on to the next one, Devin Barrett's posted a Helm chart to Fluent Bit. Devin, if you could post that in the main channel outside of that thread, it would be handy for those of us that are listening. Thanks for that. Moving on, Jolene, welcome, says, hiya. If you had a few moments for a quick question, would it be possible to get multi-arch images, specifically kube proxy? And second part, ARM support has recently been unstable. Are there any efforts to improve this? So we had...
is Ed around?
Is Ed around? We had Ed on earlier today. This is kind of a complicated answer because a lot of the core stuff is, but a lot of the containers aren't, right?
Yeah,
a lot of the
you might be better off hopping over into the ARM64 channel.
Yes. So that, I don't think a lot of people know this channel exists, so we'll just mention it. That there is a channel just for ARM people, #ARM64, and you will find lots of ARM people there, including people that are working at ARM cloud providers and things like that. You're probably looking for Ed. I hope he's listening. Let's see. I hope that answers your question. Moving on. Any luck with the YAML snippet there, or are y'all still gathering information?
Still gathering information.
Okay. Let's see. Looks like Joe Thompson is adding some good information here about accessing direct pod for the outside. Thanks for your help. Moving on to N Brand, and I think we answered this one earlier, but wouldn't hurt to repeat it. Hi guys, sorry, but I just joined late. I asked this earlier, but did not see an answer. It's in the video, which we just posted afterwards, so we did answer this somewhere. I don't think it was available at the time. Kubernetes performance question. I understand that all API calls must go through the master node for processing. While one could scale up a master vertically, is there any advantage of scaling horizontally, i.e. more masters? It is my understanding that even in a multi-master cluster, there's one master which handles the API calls, and the others are just redundant spares. Is my understanding incorrect?
There's one controller.
Mm-hmm.
So master, we should actually clarify, like master.
Yes.
Master is two different things, like actually that we just commonly put together, co-locate. But there's controller managers, which are the actual control loops that do reconciling. And those are like one active and multiple ones that can fall back. And so they kind of have a lease thing going on where they periodically check to see if the one that's supposed to be doing stuff is actually doing it. And if not, one of the other one kicks in. But for API servers, you can actually run multiple API servers, all talking to different etcd instances, and they're all active at once, and they can all be used.
Mm-hmm.
So you should use a load balancer in front of all the API servers, and depending on your load balancer, to just load on particular policy. But you should use a load balancer, not target directly a single API instance, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like Joe Thompson also agrees with you as far as being encouraged to put a load balancer in front of your masters. Also, something that you point out, as the SIG Arch people will mention, we're kind of moving away from the term masters and being more specific when it comes to the part of the control plane that you're talking about. So just something to remember there. Moving on. Surya has a question with a load of YAML, but I don't want to do 2 long YAML questions in a row. So let's put that one on hold for now, and we'll get back to it. We're still waiting on Helm Newbies more information, right? Okay, so moving on while that information is pulled in, Fickbit asks, thanks for coming. Hi, everyone. Is there a production-ready way to handle SSL certificates through Nginx Ingress? I found out today that I need to use a L4 ELB to support WebSockets, but now I can't use AWS managed certificates.
I need to see more information. Layer 4 ELB and WebSockets and certificates aren't mutually exclusive. Like so WebSockets is actually supported by the Nginx Ingress controller. I don't really know how AWS managed certificates work per se, but you know, as long as you have certificates and have SSL set up, WebSockets should be able to serve over HTTP and, you know, open up successfully. So I'd like to see a little bit more information on that. If someone else on the panel wants to supplement that, that would be great.
Let's see. It looks like a lot of people are typing. Thanks those of you that are helping out Helm Newbie with this problem. There's
so far, just as a Helm Newbie update. Oh, never mind. It might. So the folder that he was listing out in the chat is different from the folder that is posted in the discuss PV YAML.
There's a lot of YAML going back and forth, so it's now in a thread.
Yeah. So it looks like we have like our. So are we using the discuss thread at all, or is it just a Slack thread?
It started out as discuss, then moved over to Slack as questions were going back and forth.
Oh boy. Okay.
So
all right.
We will probably delete that.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and delete that so we don't get confused, if that's okay, Helm Newbie.
I'm waiting. Hopefully, after this question and maybe other questions by Helm Newbie, he'll become my Helm Master. That's what I'm hoping for. So.
Yes. Yeah. If he's Helm Newbie, are you Helm Fanboy #1, Mario?
That would be correct. Yes. Exactly. I should rename myself.
Okay. I'm going to close the topic on discuss so we don't get confused.
Did we get ThinkBit?
Yeah, we were asking for more information on that. Okay, so let's go back here a little bit. ThinkBit asks, hi everyone, is there a production ready way to handle SSL certificates for Nginx Ingress? I found out today that I need to use an L4 ELB to support WebSockets, but now I can't use AWS managed certificates. EVC would like to add that they're using JetStack Cert Manager to manage SSL certs for Nginx Ingress. It's not marketed as production ready, but we've not ran into any issues so far.
Yeah. So yeah, in this subject area, production ready is very very floppy. It's not. There isn't anything that's out there that is truly really production ready. These things are just trying to work with Let's Encrypt and automate driving certs based on Nginx Ingress and new ingresses. So that was the one thing is that, but also I'm a little interested as what he's trying to actually achieve in terms of from an end client into his cluster and what his application is doing. It sounds like he's trying to use WebSockets, and he shouldn't really be having too many issues with WebSockets. Although if he's in AWS, I don't know how the ELB works with WebSockets. I know Nginx Ingress, which he does mention, does have support for WebSockets. So I'm going to probably ping him here and ask for that stuff as well if he's not listening at the current moment. But hopefully work through this.
All right. So it looks like we have time for one, maybe two more. So do we want to go back and try to answer Surya's admission controllers PSP question?
There's also a later question by Surya. It's a very small one.
Let's do the small one first. Here she asks, can we convert single master K8s cluster to an HA cluster?
If we are talking about kubeadm, I think there is a way to do that. You create a separate etcd cluster and you expand, you use init on every master node, then you point to that etcd backend cluster. So it's a way, it's not automated. You cannot run just upgrade to HA, but
yeah. So this is one of those areas where kubeadmin is in development. The people that you want to talk to are, hold on, I just got to get the SIG cluster lifecycle information. So these people are currently the ones driving kubeadmin, and they're always looking for feedback. The HA stuff has been it's been getting a lot of work lately, and it's an area that is high churn. So, without making it sound like I'm just throwing you over to them, they are literally looking at solving these use cases like right now. So now will be a good time for you to get involved and talk to them. They're always looking for people who are actually using kubeadmin in the real world and are looking for feedback. So please contact them because they will help you out there. Looks like we're still working with Helm Newbie to grab his YAML. Thank you, Kenzie. That's Joe Thompson for your help. Let's see. We maybe have time for one more. I think what we're probably going to do here is stick around after and see if we can fix Helm Newbie. And if not, maybe either move the question over to Stack Overflow or somewhere, or discuss and get more eyeballs on it. So anyone have one final question that they want to ask before Jeff figures out the raffle for the t-shirt, the highly coveted Kubernetes t-shirt? So one thing we should probably do in the future is stick gist.github.com in the topic or something so that it's obvious to people where to stick YAML. So, okay. So it looks like some people are typing. We'll see if we have one question. I'll just go ahead and outro us here. Thanks to all the following companies for supporting the community by allowing them to participate. So that's Giant Swarm, Heptio, Liquid Web, Red Hat, Weaveworks, the University of Michigan, Packet.net, and the CNCF so far in the past few months. As we said, these are all volunteers. So if you want to be on this panel, want to help us out, you have expertise, we'd love to have you. The more people we can get, the better. We can rotate people out. Bob can actually rest for once. Bob and Jeff can actually not have to come every single time. And with that, I highly encourage you to stick around and hash office hours. We'll be, so in July, I'll be gone because I'll be at Google Next. So I think Jeffrey will be doing the stream. And it looks like we have a winner, which is Suresh Vishnoi. Sorry, I probably totally butchered that, but I will ping you on Slack. Congratulations, you've won a Kubernetes t-shirt. And thanks to everybody who's participating. And we will see everyone on the third Wednesday of next month, which is?
I think it was July 18th.
July 18th. Great. And with that, thank you very much, everyone.